Hi, everybody. My name is Janet J. I'm a health journalist, chronic pain blogger, content editor for the U.S. Pain Foundation, which means I spend my days trying to translate the gap between doctor speak and patient speak, and between what patients experience and what ends up being done in the clinic. I've got a new podcast called Our Painful Truth, and I also have a spinal cord stem implant, which means this conversation is personal for me. I come with a lot of opinions, but I want to hear mostly what everybody else here has to say on the subject. So could you introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Michelle Hazley. I am a patient of Dr. Patel, and Abbott represents me in my body. I had DRG, but I'm a nurse. Was a nurse, or I guess always a nurse, but I had to give that up because I had chronic pain. Hurt myself 2016 and had 5 surgeries up to like 2022. Long battle up and down, but here I am with Dr. Patel, and she helped me with the DRG implant that I have in place now. So at least now I could speak to you comfortably and not be thinking about the pain hurting me. And this is a little bit about me, and here's Dr. Patel.
Awesome. I'm Dr. Karen Patel. I am an interventional pain physician and the director of pain medicine at Lenox Hill Hospital in New York City. I treat patients who have some of the most complex forms of chronic pain, such as Michelle, and these are people who have often spent years searching for answers. Pain medicine fascinates me because it sits at the intersection of neuroscience and technology and human experience. Pain is one of the most common reasons that people seek medical care, but yet pain is one of the hardest things to measure and to really fully understand. So my work encompasses 2 things: helping patients break free from chronic pain, and 2, helping advance technologies that allow us to better understand and treat chronic pain.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Ryan Lakin. I work for Abbott. We advance the world of health everywhere, all over the world. I'm fortunate enough to lead Abbott's neuromodulation business, actually based here in Austin. But before I did this, I spent about 25 years in research and development as an engineer, developing products like the ones that Dr. Patel uses and the people on this panel have. So this is just a wonderful opportunity for me to spend time with people who benefit from the therapies that we developed and put into the market. So look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, I think we are really lucky today because it's rare to have the science, the medicine, and the experience all on one stage, being able to talk about this technology. But before we get into the tech, I want to start with a quick show of hands. Who in the audience has ever been asked to rate their pain on a scale of 1 to 10? Raise your hand. If you raised your hand, raise it again if you didn't really know how to answer that question or had questions about it. Yeah. Who was a little bit confused? Exactly. The pain scale is almost 70 years old. 50 million Americans live with chronic pain, 1 in 4. But the pain scale hasn't changed since Eisenhower was president. So maybe it's time. So that's the problem we're here to talk about. So Michelle, I want to start with you. You have CRPS, complex regional pain syndrome, which is pretty well accepted as being one of the most painful, if not the most painful conditions out there. Tell us a little bit, not about the medicine or the tech, but what your experience was like. When did what was the experience like, and when did you realize maybe this wasn't something that was just going to get better?
Right. Well, my surgery I had was in 2016. We're all in rush, moving around quickly in life, and I clipped my bottom of my foot, and I tore my plantar plate. I had it repaired, and for 4 years, on and off, it would bother me. And then in 2020, as a nurse, I started having problems walking. And when I went to see my doctor, unfortunately, the bone that was on the second toe, further in, it's called the metatarsal head, collapsed. So I had no bone on the bottom of my foot, which was quite excruciating. So I put myself in a cam boot, which is a walking boot, to help me offload the pain. And after that, unfortunately, I had 4 other surgeries. Failure of the procedure. The first time I went to see a doctor, they told me it's salvage surgery. Too bad you're not 70 or 80 years old, because this is happening when you're in the prime of your life. You're not sedentary, but we don't think it's probably going to work. But I said, well, I have a lot of pain and I need it fixed. So I would get it fixed, and then as time would go, I would go, great, and then I would start to regress back down again. And it would be an up and down roller coaster after 4 other surgeries. After the last surgery, I was out of my mind with the pain. I was talking to my doctor, and we were having conversations, believe it or not, about amputation. Just take part of the foot off. I can't take this pain anymore. Why do I really need the front of my foot anymore? And he even had me go to a neurologist just to rule out CRPS. And he did all this testing and everything, and we said, no, you don't have it. That's why I had my 5th surgery. And it would be that roller coaster round again, recuperate, start feeling good, and then I would regress again. That was probably in 2022. And the journey started happening that I said, how could I live with this pain? I have no more options for surgery. I'm not going to take my foot off, I guess. So what am I going to do? So I researched things. I tried acupuncture. There's an app called The Curable. I tried doing meditation. I found out that crocheting is a great meditation for me. It would take my thought process away at thinking about the pain. With CRPS, it's a constant reminder that the foot hurts. It would be, if I would try to go out for dinner, if I could physically go out for dinner, I would be looking on the right side where I could put my foot up and elevate, because elevation was the part that my foot loved. If we went somewhere I couldn't have elevation, take the sneaker off, put my foot on my husband's lap. He didn't really care. He was fine with that, but it was hard, and I got to the point that how many places am I going to go and ask for doctors for help, and they would say, I'll give you gabapentin, give you a lot of medication. Also, they would start thinking, are you a pain seeker who's looking for pain medication? Like, are you looking for oxycodone, Percocet? You're not here for that. I'm not going to give you that. So it was difficult. I got to a point that I tried to see another doctor, and he's from Northwell, and he basically said I couldn't help you. And I was trying to keep my hopes up high, and I said, I'm going to be probably ambivalent, not think about it. If he can't help me, he can't help me. But when he did say that, I cried. I sobbed literally in his office. But he was telling me that there's a doctor that I think that maybe be able to help you. He didn't know Dr. Patel personally, but he heard about her and the great innovative things that she was doing for pain management. And he said, I think you really should start looking into seeing Dr. Patel. So with the CRPS, it's just chronic reminder that you're in pain. Your thought process is there about pain. As you're sitting here, you're listening, maybe you are in chronic pain. And it's hard to concentrate. The concentrate level is quite hard. They say that CRPS is worse than being pregnant. I've been pregnant twice, and having an amputation. With those things, being pregnancy, it happens and it goes away. With CRPS, it's here to stay.
Yeah. Well, and I'm so glad that you finally found Dr. Patel.
Yes.
But you had to go through 4 specialists and 5 surgeries before you got there, and you had to have the drive to do that.
Yes.
Dr. Patel, could you tell us a little bit about just a quick lay of the land of what's the difference between just regular I stub my toe acute pain and the kind of chronic pain that we're talking about here?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So pain in its simplest form is protective. It's the body's alarm system, right? So if you sprain your ankle or if you touch a hot plate, pain tells you to stop and protect the body while an injury is healing. But in chronic pain, that is not the case. What actually happens in chronic pain is that the injury may resolve, but the central nervous system doesn't get the message that the danger has subsided. And so pain signals are continuously sent. The brain and the spinal cord become sensitized, and they continue to send painful signals, even though the original injury has resolved. And with this dysregulation, that's what really leads to the difference between pain being a sign of an injury and chronic pain being more of a true disease process of the nervous system.
So back to Michelle, Dr. Patel just described it for us really well in medical language, but what was that? You talked a little bit about what the experience was like, but when someone asks you to rate your scale on your pain on a scale of 1 to 10, what ran through your mind when you were in the worst of the worst?
If you had to rate it on that pain scale, I would say a 10 or plus. Now, if you had to rate that scale, it depends, you know. I came here through an airport, walked to go get my badge. The old Michelle, without the DRG, I used a knee scooter, and I wore out the treads of the tire once, so I had to get new tires. So my right foot was elevated at the knee scooter so you don't put weight down. So the life has changed that way. I've been able to walk physically to go to the hotel and pick up my badge instead of summoning somebody to get the badge for me or me using a taxi. So it has changed. It maybe not seem as great for you of, oh, she's doing that, but coming out for how I was before, sitting in that chair was my thing, you know, watching TV was my thing, crocheting was my thing. Doing puzzles with my dog sitting next to me was my thing. But it's not me anymore. I've been also a recovery room nurse. So I always had to gauge, you know, ask people on that 1 to 10 scale what pain level you are. It got to a point that sometimes people were very confused, especially when there's language barriers, different cultures. So I would always ask them, is it something that you could just maybe put ice on? Is it something that you need 2 Tylenol for? Is it something that you need Advil for? Is it something you need stronger medication, just to kind of gauge and see where they're at? Because it's not just that easy to ask for that number, because it's such a broad thing, and I wasn't being asked those questions. Did it change my quality of life? Yes, it did. But the thing is, it's objectively and subjectively, and that's where I'm at now, sitting in the chair. I do have modified shoes. So with the help of the DRG, I have these called, it's a cam sneaker. These are, believe it or not, $1,000 worth, okay? You are worth it. Like I always say, if you would do it for your children, why wouldn't you do it for yourself? So I spent sneakers, New Balance I bought. I went to see an orthotist. She made it into a cam boot, so it's a little rocker, less weight on my foot. I literally have a hole in the bottom of my foot, okay, in the shoe, not my foot, the shoe itself, so it's less weight bearing. And it's also a carbon plate, so I don't have to flex my foot. With all of that combined with this DRG, I'm able to sit here and talk to you and walk from point A to B with minimal pain.
There you go. Well, that leads us back to, you know, Dr. Patel. Give us a quick lay of the land in terms of when PT and other things, or when PT and maybe the initial round of medications don't work, what options do people have, and how does neuromodulation fit into those options?
Yeah, I mean, chronic pain is very complex, and so we always have to take a layered approach. And, you know, we usually start with something conservative like physical therapy, exercise, or movement-based rehabilitation. And, you know, that's focusing on restoring function and restoring range of motion as well as strength. You know, behavioral strategies are amazingly important, such as cognitive behavioral therapy or mindfulness, which really allows patients to help the brain in processing painful signals. Medications may be useful in regulating nerve signaling or reducing inflammation in the body. But when these things have failed, we look at advanced interventions. And one of those advanced interventions is neuromodulation. So neuromodulation is the use of very precise amounts of energy that can actually change the way the body signals for pain are actually processed. And so the great thing about neuromodulation is that it doesn't actually mask the pain signals. It actually affects the biology of the pain pathways itself. And with this, we're able to not just change the score for pain, but we're able to restore a patient's function, their independence, and their overall quality of life.
Well, before I ask Ryan to really delve into what neuromodulation is, since Michelle brought it up, you have a couple of questions that you prefer asking patients to 1 to 10 scale to, don't you? Are there better questions than that you use?
Definitely. So, pain is one of the most difficult things that we have struggled for decades to really quantify and really fully understand. And so, instead of asking patients what their pain score is, because one person's 4 is another person's 9. Right? And so, this is affected by biology, by stress, by sleep, by how pain signaling is in that particular individual. And so I really like to focus on function. And so I ask patients, are you able to sleep through the night? Are you able to walk your dog? Are you able to sit through a full dinner with your family? And I think that focus on function is really where we need to have all of our energy put as we look to, develop pain therapies moving forward.
I definitely agree. So, we've had you on the sidelines until now, but
Let's do it.
give us a layman's explanation. We've been using the word neuromodulation all day. It's a long word. What does it mean? What does it mean for pain patients?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is that you've heard what life is like with chronic pain, and so when we talk about like the unmet need is here, right? It's the reality of people suffering with really no great solution, and so until neuromodulation. And so what neuromodulation is, and Dr. Patel touched on it a little bit, but if you think of it as it's a therapeutic solution that is very similar to a pacemaker. So how many people know someone who maybe has a pacemaker? So a pacemaker delivers electrical signals to the heart to help the heart beat in a regular pattern. Well, neuromodulation is similar technology. It has a device that provides small electrical signals to different parts of the nervous system. Unlike heart muscle, it applies it to the nervous system. And so the nervous system is, you have a spinal cord which goes down your back. And so we have stimulation for spinal cord stimulation, which tends to be a small wire is placed by a physician like Dr. Patel up basically against your spinal cord and delivers very small pulses of energy. It doesn't go in your spinal cord, so just to take that concern away. But it's very safe and sits just above the spinal cord and provides electrical pulses. Those electrical pulses in a certain pattern changes the path of communication to the brain. And so your brain begins to process pain very differently than it is being processed without neuromodulation. There's also, you've heard the conversation about DRG, that's dorsal root ganglion stimulation. That's also a part of the nervous system, but it's much more targeted. And so where spinal cord stimulation may be for more larger areas of pain, like general back pain, DRG can be very specific, say, for someone's foot. And so we have these different technologies by just basically placing that wire in a different portion of the spine relative to the spinal cord and relative to different nerves. That allows you to then change the communication back to the brain about a very specific area. It's a technology that's been available for decades, although maybe less well known than that of pacemakers, as an example.
Yeah, I was in pain for 20 years before I got my spinal cord stimulator, and mine is older. Yours is a lot newer than mine. So we've gotten the science side, but tell us what the actual experience was like. I know I did a trial. Did they make you do one? What was as a patient? Yeah. Take us through that process. Yeah. What it was like for you.
So I did have a trial. So basically for the trial, I was awake with some sedation. And then she put the trial in, and then I'm like, is it on? And you're like, we got to wait. So I think when I had
little impatient, weren't you?
What? Little
impatient.
I was an impatient. And so I had to wait about a week, and then she put it on. and they were playing around, and my foot would twitch a little bit. They said, "Oh, we got the right spot." Because, you know, how would you think a pacemaker on the backside of my buttocks area would be connected to my foot? But it was connected to the L1, L2, and the S1. That's the lumbar and the sacral. And if you do look through research, there's all parts, the lumbar parts that are connected to the foot. My problem is I could specifically tell you where my foot pain is, the ball of my foot. So we would try different neuromodulation settings to see where I could get it, where I feel some sensation. So I'd start feeling tingling. Then I said it's getting too much, that my whole leg would start to shake or move around, but nothing hurt. But it was quite exciting because, you know, being a nurse and also being a layperson, and with the science of how it is connected to my back, it was amazing that thinking that maybe there is hope. Because, you know, with CRPS, you do give up hope. I'm a person that I'm very positive. I put positive twists, but there are days that, you know, you're sad. You know, you try not to be sad, but it's hard. And I don't know if any of you suffer from chronic pain, but it is hard. And to find a solution, it was fantastic. So after I had the trial, I was with that trial with a big bandage on my back, no showering, nothing until I went to see her. And then she took it all out. And then she said, "All right, what do you think?" I went, "Game changer." So it definitely helped me. I said, this is what I found that's going to help and solve, at least, maybe if it won't take all of my pain away, but it'll take a lot of my pain that I've been having. So then I went for the real thing about a month and a half later, and it's permanent, and it's fantastic. So I could do my own neuromodulation therapy settings if I need to. They set up different kinds of settings. So it has definitely changed my life for the best.
Well, I know mine is old enough that I just have an iPod that I use
iPod?
I know, it's an actual iPod to move it, but things have definitely changed between
It's on my phone.
my
app.
era and your era.
I have an app.
Yeah. Ryan, could you tell us a little bit about connected care and how what it is actually? Let's start with what it is.
Yeah, so I think for us, so we talked about iPods and iPhones, but connected care for us is super important. People, for instance, I think you live in Florida now, right? And Dr. Patel practices in New York. So that's a little bit of a distance, but that's a long clinic visit, for lack of a better term. And so during COVID, there was this huge need where people weren't going to their clinics and going to visit, but patients still needed support. And so we developed an amazing technology for connected care that allows people to use their iPhone, in this case iPhone, or their controller that they got. That controller is their normal phone that they want to use, but it also has a very secure app on it. And what it allowed us to do was for a clinician like Dr. Patel to be in her office and connect directly to a patient with video, and then also make setting changes of the implanted device of the patient remotely. And so you can imagine how impactful this can be. This can be impactful for those of you who live in, well, even Austin's traffic is getting pretty bad, but for those in New York or very densely populated places where you have to maybe travel a short distance but a long time, or for people who live in rural areas or who maybe are snowbirds and like to go down to Florida in the winter and then go back, allows people to keep connected to their clinician, allows them to make adjustments as needed, because pain it's a chronic disease, right? It's something that changes over time. It's not static, just like other therapies that we offer as well for things like Parkinson's disease. And so this connected care is a really amazing technology that has enabled access, but also enabled connectivity to make sure that people can get the therapy they need when they need it, regardless of where they happen to be. And so I think it's been, for us at Abbott, it's really been impactful to see kind of how people are using it. It's now Tens of thousands of people have utilized that across 19 countries around the world, so it's not just something that's available here in the U.S., but it's available to many of those where we provide product today.
That's incredible. I know finding new doctors is a bigger concern for most people with chronic pain than those without chronic pain would think. It is a huge deal to find a doctor, to find a doctor that you like and who you respect their opinion on stuff. So I'm very on board for that idea. I wish that I had waited maybe a little longer and gotten in on the train there.
Don't be jealous.
Yeah, I'm a little jealous. I'm not going to lie. From your side, Dr. Patel, how does that connected care help you stay in touch with your patients and coordinate their care?
I think one of the challenges we have in pain medicine is that pain is very subjective and very episodic. And so for the longest time, we've had to rely on clinic visits where we get just a snapshot of what's going on with the patient. But with the advances of connected care, we're now able to do better than that. We're able to, with specifically, applications like the Neurosphere Digital Health, we're able to intervene with patients between their office visits. We're able to get information about their experiences with how their device is performing in between those office visits. This allows us to have more of a continuous loop of treatment where we're able to be more responsive to the changes in therapy that the patient may need. What's really exciting is the potential in the future to potentially pair that with physiologic data, sleep data, activity data, other data streams, which will allow us to really get that holistic view of what's going on with the patient, as opposed to just what is their pain scale, which we know does not adequately convey what's going on with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we get into the future, I wanted to ask, because we sort of touched on it, but, Michelle, you moved. And you're living across the country.
Yes.
What was your thought process behind that, and how did you feel comfortable enough to do that? Yeah.
Panic. I finally found a great doctor, and what am I going to do? I was kind of dotting my I's, crossing my T's, checking my insurance. Please take my insurance. Or if I find somebody closer to Florida, or if I don't, I'm going to fly up to New York for my exam. But it was great because I was on the line with Abbott and Dr. Patel. It's basically you have a magnet, and I was trying to do it, and I asked my husband to help me out a little bit. So it's a magnet that hooks up to the back where the implant is, and they were able to basically control me like a puppet. Not literally, but, so he said, now I have control, and he started playing around with the S1, S2, and L1, L2, and the S1, and I would say, okay, I feel it, the foot is twitching, okay, we'll bring it down. So we were able to reprogram it, because I said, I think I need something a little bit more on the ball of my foot. So then he would reprogram, I don't know how many programs, but so far I'm up to 4 or 5. I tend to try to stay on one program, not hop around. I try to stay on one number. Today I had to go get a badge, so I had to walk blocks, to get there. 8 minutes there, 8 minutes back physically. Would I have been able to do that without a DRG? No. With the DRG I was able to, but I got back and my foot's like talking to me a little bit, but I'm like, all right, you calm down. And I said, let me just boot up my program a little bit just to help me out, and it took it away.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So the distance didn't, I was fearful of the distance because finally I got somebody. But it was great that I could just go anywhere. I could go to Austin here and live, and they could help me and connect me.
Yeah, absolutely. So you touched on it a minute ago, but I want to go back to it, Dr. Patel. What would you love to have in measuring pain? What kind of, biomarkers, what kind of objective data, if you could control the info coming in, what would you love to be able to work with?
I think we need to know how patients are really interacting with their lives. We need to know, how is their sleep affected? What's their overall activity level? And I think we want to have a sense of really, like, how are they outside of the exam room? Because a patient may only share with us what they remember from the month. Maybe some of the moments that the pain was the worst, but not the average every day. And I think it's really important to be able to convey that. So I think, physiologic data that we can get, and then we can better understand what the whole picture looks like for that patient. And I want to just add one thing. So we've talked about, you have a spinal cord stimulator, and Michelle has a dorsal root ganglion stimulator. But I have to tell you that as a physician, why physicians are excited about dorsal root ganglion therapy is because it really allows us to treat pain with the precision that the nervous system requires. So the dorsal root ganglion is a key gateway for sensory signals entering the spinal cord. And so by targeting this structure, as opposed to what we do with spinal cord stimulation, we're able to affect pain signals with much more specific focus. And so for patients like Michelle who have
Bottom of the foot.
Yes, exactly. For patients like Michelle who've had CRPS and specifically affecting the bottom of her foot, previous therapies were not successful because they were just too broad. They weren't focal enough. And so with dorsal root ganglion therapy, we're able to offer patients with the most significant level of suffering a very focal treatment that is quite effective for them. And so that's why, as a physician, we're excited that we're able to treat the nervous system, this disease of the nervous system, with much more precision.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ryan, I was actually gonna go to that one next. You had spinal cord stims that already worked to some extent. What was the clinical gap that Abbott identified? I guess in specificity, and how do you decide what to focus on?
Yeah, I think these kind of conversations, right? Dr. Patel telling us in real time kind of what she wants from companies to develop, so that's good input. Appreciate that. But I think if you go back, we've had the DRG therapy now in the market for about a decade, maybe just a little bit more than a decade. It started really clinical trials back in about 2012, I think is when it was. And you've heard exactly the reason, the unmet need of why the therapy was developed. There was a need to although you have kind of broad coverage with spinal cord stimulation, which works really well, there are people who have very specific pain in their foot. Maybe some people who get joint replacements sometimes get very targeted pain. Groin pain is also another area that people have very targeted pain. And so there's this opportunity to be more targeted. Just like we have medications that try to be, everything tries to be more specific. And so it was really the driver. And so when you listen and you talk to people, you talk to clinicians, they talk about kind of their patients and what the needs are. That's what drives us. And at the same time, at Abbott at least, we're super focused on the sustainability goals that we have as a company. And that really, if you know much about Abbott or you don't know a lot about Abbott, Abbott's a big place. They in 2020, we served about 2 billion people, used our products around the world. And so we established sustainability goals around touching 3 billion people by 2030. And so when you think about adding 1 billion people around the world to have access to products like the ones we offer here, it really makes you kind of think about innovation and really solving big unmet need problems, big problems for the healthcare system, big problems for people who suffer from different types of chronic diseases like chronic pain. And so those are just some guiding principles that we have as a company. And so those guiding principles really help us think about how to solve big problems. And obviously, people who are contemplating amputation is a big problem. And I grew up with a parent who suffered from a chronic condition, and so I have this personal aspect of kind of seeing what it's like as a very young kid being actually a caregiver. for your parent. And so I can appreciate kind of the impact that chronic conditions have on people. And so we're really trying to solve big chronic conditions, help people live healthier lives.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
We do our best.
Me as
so
well.
thanks.
Yeah.
But, to those 2030 goals of helping more patients globally, what does meaningful access mean when we're talking about technology like this that is, expensive to develop and expensive to deploy, and how can we get more people be able to use this?
Yeah, so I think when we laid out those goals, one of the key thing I was in the research and development group at the time was developing, like putting it into our development process. So developing for access and affordability. And so as we work through the development process of products, we really contemplate what does access look like. We have other products as well, like our Libre, which is our continuous glucose monitor, which is, we really try to drive access. And so for when I think about access, it's how do the people that need the therapy get access to the therapy? And that there's a lot that goes into that. There's the product itself. There's how people pay for the product. It's how physicians get informed and trained to use products. It's the education aspect. And so from my perspective, that's, especially now leading the business, it's super important given what there's about 50 million people that suffer from chronic pain just in this country. And so when you think about the numbers of people that we can potentially impact, it's massive, but we need to be able to do it in a way that works in our healthcare system. And that's super important.
Dr. Patel, I would love to hear if you have any thoughts about access. Would love to hear them, but also just would love to hear. You went to medical school in the era of pain is the fifth vital sign, and now we're at a place where we're implanting DRGs and having being able to move across the country and care remotely. What has that been like from a clinician's side?
Yeah, so in medical training or in medical school and residency, the pain scale is one of the first tools that we encounter. And it's simple. Ask your patient to rate their pain on a scale of 0 to 10, and this will help us determine how well our therapies are effective for those patients. But like I said, one patient's 4 is the other patient's 9. And so, so many things go into that rating. It's their biology, it's their sleep, their stress, the innuendos and the subtlety of their actual nervous system. And so we miss a lot of information from patients about what their whole life actually looks like. And I think that, as we start to expand areas of connected care, we're gonna only really unveil what that holistic view of pain medicine can be, because we're gonna understand the condition of pain much better.
What does that look like? What does a world look like with genuinely better pain measurement? What would we be able to do with that?
Yeah, I mean, the goal is to shift the focus from scales. And pain scales have a use, right? They allow us to track trends in therapy effectiveness. But, it's not allowing us to focus on improving patients' function. And I think that really has to be the goal, where we are deciding on functional goals for each patient that's unique to them, based on how their pain is impairing them and preventing them from doing the things that they want to do. And really setting unique goals, which allows us to be so much more effective in just improving patients' quality of life and their overall engagement and their ability to continue to be independent.
So for Michelle specifically, you were her 5th doctor, right? 5th specialist?
Probably.
Yeah.
Lost count.
Something like that.
But she's my last.
Exactly. What did her case look like when she came in that made you think DRG is the way to go, this is what's going to help her the most?
Yeah, so Michelle had clear signs of complex regional pain syndrome. right? And so when we talk about, that pain is a sign of, the body's protection system, and that normally it's part of the body's alarm system, and that patients with chronic pain have a dysregulation of the system. And specifically, patients with CRPS have a dysregulation that leads to a hypersensitivity of their nervous system. So signals that are mild and short-acting then become magnified and persistent. And so that's the classic type of presentation that Michelle had. And what leads to that is, it's not just the peripheral nerves that are involved, it's also the spinal cord, the brain, the autonomic and the immune system that are involved. And that's why patients with CRPS, we see burning pain, we see exquisite sensitivity to touch, changes in temperature, changes in color, and swelling in the affected extremity. And so Michelle had all of these symptoms, and it correlated with where she had her 5 surgeries. So she was the perfect candidate because she had focal neuropathic pain and complex regional pain syndrome type 2 to receive a trial of dorsal root ganglion therapy. And that's what we did.
Yep.
And here we are today. So let's talk about the future. Let's imagine and extrapolate a little bit, Ryan. I'm not going to hold you to a roadmap. I'm not going to hold you to anything.
Okay,
But
that's nice.
What would
That's
what
nice
would
to have
become
that.
possible if we had more objective data about pain? What could you do with that?
Yeah, I
you and your
think, well,
people?
first of all, we've talked some about this idea of mobility, right? Mobility is a huge, almost biomarker of pain in some ways. And so, we've kind of already started this journey. We talked about Neurosphere Virtual Clinic, but we also have the ability for people to have on the same app kind of what's called patient-reported outcomes, how they're doing, and checking in with patients along the way, along their journey, to see if there's been changes that have happened. And so we've already kind of made that progress, as well as during this trial period. The trial period is the initial phase to see if someone's going to respond to the therapy before they go forward with the full procedure. And so we've been able to quantify in a lot of ways and then provide that information back to the physician as well as back to the patient. And so that work has already started, and I think is continuing to make an impact. And I think it's been amazing to see people's response, actually seeing the progress, because a lot of times in the course of 1 or 2 weeks, you may not realize how much progress you've actually made.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's best to just ask the caregiver, and the patient will say, no, I'm not doing much better. And they said, well, you haven't walked to the mailbox in 3 years, and you walk to the mailbox every day this week, which sounds small, but it's significant. But then when you go from there, where do you go moving forward? The world is our oyster, as I say, and I think in technology, especially in a health tech company like ours, innovation is what drives kind of progress. And so when we think about the use of virtual clinic, when we think about the use of these patient-reported outcomes, when you think about these aspects of mobility as kind of a potential biomarker, you can really start to understand through so virtual clinic uses a camera, just like many of you may see facial recognition at different places you go to. You can also use it as a way to understand how people have evolved over time and how they've changed over time. And so you can actually be more specific and objective than someone's maybe rating of a pain score. And we've actually started to show some of that data just recently at a large healthcare conference earlier this year. At the same time, you can use things like wearables to also understand motion and movement and mobility and sleep, like an Apple Watch. But there's other ways to do that long term. Those are kind of early indicators of ways on where we can spend time and where we can focus. And so, we have an amazing R&D team, an amazing AI team and software team inside the company that is doing really good work to kind of advance the future of technology as it relates to being much more objective and quantitative, so it can help people understand who have devices or how kind of where they are on their journey. It can help physicians understand objectively how their patients are responding to a therapy. but it can also help our healthcare system understand the benefits of the types of therapies we offer without it being kind of this qualitative, give me a smiley face or an unhappy face. That's how I think of the 1 to 10 score. I think there's 3 different boxes of colors and faces on the thing, but we're trying to get away from that, and I think there's a lot of data and objective data that can help us do that, and I think that's the exciting part about where we're headed, especially when you have amazing technologies like these that can really help kind of do a lot between a smartphone, which is a really smart computer in your hand or in your pocket, and a device.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, security is a big concern. I know when I got mine, and is outside of the purview of this panel, but you know, let's say we're very secure, and you have that kind of biometric data. Somebody has a wearable and a phone, and you've got all of that data. How is AI being rolled out and maybe used to parse some of that, or figure out a way through that just cloud of data?
Yeah, I mean, so AI is like the most commonly used term these days. I mean, we all probably, we see it in certain ways, and we don't realize it's being used in other ways. But for us, when you look at something as simple, not as simple, but as something like a facial recognition type of thing, you can very quickly start to understand and predict almost kind of where people are headed before they actually get there. So, you know, a lot of times medicine is kind of dealing with people, like we're kind of a sick care health system as opposed to preventative care. And so when you start to use AI, you potentially have the opportunities to really get ahead and prevent things from happening and prevent people from getting worse before it actually happens, as opposed to just responding to people once they've come in with maybe worsening pain or worsening mobility. That's kind of our hope, is that we can really start to change the trajectory of people in our country and people around the world with chronic pain.
Yeah, as a physician, I'm really excited about the idea of taking the, you know, patient-reported experiences and combining that with some of this biometric data, and then looking at large patient populations with the use of AI so that we can draw some of the relationships that we haven't been able to see before between pain, behavior, and biology. And we just haven't been able to see that, to really understand pain enough. And so I'm really excited to see what we're going to learn toward that wellness strategy, you know, where we're not just on the offensive, you know, we're proactively creating wellness.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And the other part I didn't touch on is there's this population aspect. So when you have tens and tens of thousands of people who have these therapies, you can start to understand kind of what has the best impact, but maybe has less impact. Who's someone who was like you that could benefit from the therapy in a different way, and help guide faster decision making, which is obviously super important.
That's interesting because a lot of family and friends, they're not AI, but they're human AIs, I guess, and they say your face looks much lighter. You know, they say your face looked different. You know, you had that difference of pain versus lightness that you have now. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Dr. Patel, what would be your wish list for the next couple years in terms of what tech development would you love to see, and what do you see helping your patients?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, what my hope is for everybody who's here in this conversation today is that, you know, we acknowledge that, you know, chronic pain is real, that it's a complex disease of the nervous system, and that, you know, for the longest time, probably a decade, we've had a hard time measuring pain. And really, there's been a lot of misunderstandings because of that. But we are really entering a new era of medicine where we're able to better understand, you know, how people are affected by pain in terms of their own reported experiences, but then also potentially through biometrics that are in the pipeline. And so this is really going to enable us to just move beyond shifting the pain score, right, from a number or two. This is going to allow us to really restore function in our patients' lives and make probably the most significant impact.
Yeah, and that was going to be my next and one of my final questions is, Michelle, I don't want to hear a number. I want to hear, how is your life? Give me a couple of sentences. How is your life different now than it was? What has changed?
Um, before I came here, I had to think about it because even just the couple of months that I have on the DRG, I kind of try to push it away. But I started doing the befores and afters. And before the DRG, I was up till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, non-pain, icing the foot, watching movies, doing meditation, going, this is another night. You know, here we go again. Now I could get to sleep. I've always been a night owl, but like 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. Now I could cook. Damn. So now
That's huge, though.
I know, but
Yeah.
my husband was cooking before.
No one's cooking for you. You're cooking for them. Yeah.
So now I'm cooking. But before I would sit on my bar stool and cook at the stovetop, and that's how I would make my dinners. I would do Stop and Shop orders, you know, and deliver. Now I could go through a sort of a small store, feel comfortable, and shop on my own and make my own selections.
Well, and as you said, you were able to walk a couple blocks to get your platinum badge and
you know,
walk back and still be able to
these
sit
seem
here
like
for
little
this.
things, but they are great things for me. If you don't want to walk for me, because I was always jealous of seeing everybody walking and exercising through windows, through my house, passing my house, and I always wanted to walk and I couldn't do it. And you know, when my husband, I said, go for a walk, and I'm like, you know, now my dog's like, what's a walk? This is a walk again? So it's a game changer. It's a great journey. It made my life better, more manageable, livable, happier.
And yeah, people that don't understand what it's like to not be able to cook or not be able to get to the mailbox, it's a huge gift when you can sit to cook something and walk to the mail and be able to walk 2 blocks and not be knocked on your butt.
Right.
So what I want people to take from this hour is that the problem of measuring pain and the complete inadequacy of the tools we've been using for 70 years, people are taking it seriously. People are clinicians, researchers, patients, people all throughout the medical sphere have recognized the massive limitations with the 1 to 10 scale and are really working for solutions to move past it. So we're gonna break for questions, but I'll go one more. I'd like each of you to leave us with one thing that you want everybody in the audience to carry out the door with them. Michelle?
I would say don't give up hope. There's always someone out there. If anybody of you here have chronic pain or family members, it's just by word of mouth. But I really feel, I know it's more than one sentence, but I feel that it's very hard to find somebody like Dr. Patel. And I feel that there should be more shout outs of, you know, pain specialists like that, advertising, helping us, you know, to live, because, you know, you could be sitting next to somebody and that person is in excruciating pain, but they don't show it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dr. Patel?
You know, I think I'd just remind the audience that pain is not just a symptom. Chronic pain is actually a disease state of the nervous system and needs to be respected in that same way. I mean, we see how through Michelle's, you know, courage, she came here and shared her whole story about how this has dramatically affected her life, her overall quality of life, her independence, her ability to relate to her husband and her family. And I think we need to understand that chronic pain is around us everywhere, and that we have to recognize that it impacts, you know, not just our friends and our family, but our country as a whole. And we need to be serious about embracing technology to really allow us to more effectively understand pain, how it affects us all, and 2, then embracing therapies that allow us to really, truly effectively treat pain in a way that we haven't had previously.
Real quick, Ryan, and then we'll get to some questions if anybody
I would say
has any.
I think the big thing for us is just continuing to innovate for access. I think you see the benefits, and companies like Abbott are committed to continuing to do what we need to do from an evidence perspective as well as an innovation perspective to help make it easier for people to get access to therapies like this.
All right. Does anybody have any questions for anybody on the panel? We got about 5 minutes. Yeah, please come on up to the mic, anybody.
Thanks. In terms of the process of actually applying the equipment, how much fidelity, how much accuracy, how much competence is there around placement, and then, of course, the percentage of success at being able to get the desired outcome? Is that something related to skill, or is there a database or a way of searching that physicians can reach?
So there's a lot of layers to that. So I myself, one of the other hats I wear is I'm a pain medicine fellowship program director. So what that means is that I train other pain doctors, you know, after they've completed their medical school, their residency, and then they do a pain fellowship. And that's where we really hone their skills on that precision about how to place these devices. But that goes hand in hand with working with our partners, particularly at Abbott, with really expanding training. You know, I've worked with Abbott to train not just physicians in the United States, but outside of the United States, and how to precisely, you know, place these therapies. And so, you know, it's critical that we have the best quality of care, but it's great that we have, you know, industry colleagues who are committed to that level of precision to really deliver that high fidelity care to patients.
And I think a lot of that is driven in combination with clinical evidence. So a lot of clinical studies to investigate prior to commercialization, where's the best place to place a lead relative to where the pain is, what are the right settings to demonstrate the efficacy for those therapies.
Definitely.
That's awesome. Appreciate you guys creating the panel. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
I wanted to ask, in its current state and or even once it's perfected, how will your technology change health education, whether it's, you know, nurses, obviously MDs, or even dentistry, and would your technology change the way alternative medicine, at least in the USA, works, such as acupuncture, massage, chiropractic, et cetera?
Let me take that. So I think, first of all, I think that the great part about combining the technology with the digital side is that the digital component enables an amazing way to improve education. For instance, the app can now have embedded education. The way the physicians can get trained, the more standardized it becomes, the more it becomes available to more people. So I think the education piece, I think we've done a lot on education, and then obviously partnering with physicians like Dr. Patel with fellowship programs to make sure that physicians are adequately trained to use the technology so that the consistency of positive outcomes is there. I think that's maybe how I would answer that. But I think the software age and the AI age allows for just a rapid amount of education, both at the patient level as well as at the clinician level.
Sure.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time educating my patients about their condition, as I think it's really important for them to understand what's going on with them, but then also to feel empowered to understand what's happening inside of them. I also myself have a license in medical acupuncture, and so not everything is for everybody. But I think the more that we can get education out there through digital platforms like this, we're able to explain to patients which therapies are most appropriate for them, and for them to make informed decisions. And so that's what I'm super excited about as the digital age continues to expand.
I didn't take it lightly also, because as being the patient, you know, you're having leads put in your back. But Dr. Patel had me go for an MRI, making sure my back is good, because you need to put the leads in a certain spot, and if your spine is not correct, it's not going to work. So she dotted her I's and crossed her T's. We had a lot of conversations, and we went for a go, because, you know, with the stats of a success was worth me not, me just not sitting there. I have to be proactive for myself.
Yeah, no, I just was going to say, for me, it was huge that you got to try it, basically commitment-free. That's the term. It's a commitment-free thing. You get to try it for a week or two, like you said earlier. And if it works, then hurrah, you get the real one. And if it doesn't work, then you're out a week being kind of stinky because you couldn't shower, you know?
Right.
It's really, when it's life-changing, it's life-changing.
You know, what I'd say to that is like a lot of patients who have chronic pain, something has happened to them. It's like the surgeries happened to them or the injury happened to them. But this way, you actually know what you're going to get. And I tell my patients, you know, whatever you get in the trial is what your permanent implant is going to be. And that's how I want you to make your decision. And I think that really restores their autonomy and their sense of like decision making, you know, because they've had a lot of things happen to them, right?
Yeah.
I was scared because the trial did work, and then I had the DRG placed in, and I'm like, I don't feel like, is it working? Did you get it in the right spot? And then she said, just give it a little time. They call washing, and you know, it takes the body a little time. And then with 1 or 2 days, I'm like, oh, I feel a little different today. You know, but you have to build up your confidence again, because I don't know if you were a patient with chronic pain, but how many times you get pushed down and sad and all of that, and you think about, do I do this again, and a failure? But it was a success for me, so I'm a winner.
Yeah, I definitely, I think we underestimate the amount of perseverance it takes of chronic pain patients and just hope. Like, because you get to a point where hope seems like it could be a dangerous thing. And you got to that point and you pushed past it and you found something that really helped.
Yeah, I mean, Michelle, I think you've heard me say this before, but I just can't applaud your courage enough to not lose that hope and continue to look for therapies. And that's what led you to my office,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, unfortunately, sometimes we see patients who give up too early. And I think your story is really, both of your stories is very inspiring to those people that, hey, if you're out there suffering with chronic pain, don't give up the hope.
Don't give up. I know I was reading about CRPS initially, and they called it like the suicide disease. You know, people give up. They do contemplate. They do think, you know, is it worth not me being in the world, you know, with all that pain? Because it is a struggle, you know, and I remember that. I'm always a positive person, never been depressed. But I did get a point once in my head, like, well, is it really worth it? You know, so it is scary when you're a positive person and thinking those thoughts, you know, but, you know, I put the twist, put the positive to it, and continue on with life.
Yeah. I'm a positive person, but I got very depressed.
It's hard.
It's
hard.
Like, I will absolutely own it. I had a hard time. We're running a little, can we do another 2 questions? I'm not sure who I'm asking here, but yeah?
Thumbs up.
Okay, cool. Go for it.
Okay, I'll try and be quick and specific, and it's slightly a little different to what you've been talking about. Thank you, but I'll start firstly by saying thanks all for your sharing today, and I love the stories and the vulnerability. I know what it's like to have been the person kind of having to give a random pain score, and I know what it's like to have the person say, gosh, what have you done 5 years on? You actually don't look angry. And it was really just pain not being on my face. So thank you all. My question is broader, and it is around at what level, and I fully acknowledge chronic pain that is as a disease in itself. What I want to ask is around when chronic pain is related to a situation. And to put that in context, I have a fully rebuilt back. I've an operation that was a 5-year recovery from, that kind of stuff. So, but now I have a loose screw, and the loose screw is putting pressure on somewhere else. And so I'm living back in constant pain. Now, the fix is another, very large operation and another very large recovery, or I put up with it and I do a whole lot of physical rehab and all those kind of stuff. I think my question is around how much should one manage pain, go through something like an implant that manages pain, or are we just treating symptoms, and how, like where do you make the calls? Does that make sense of a question?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
it makes sense. And this is something that I deal with every day in the office with patients, which is understanding, is there something structurally that needs to be fixed that is causing the pain? And I think that is a question. But then to your question, what is the consequence of that? As you mentioned,
It takes me out for another 4 years.
it would be a large surgery. And so then the question has to become the relationship between the patient and the physician. What's that risk-benefit conversation look like, right? And are there more, conservative things that can be tried to possibly mitigate that pain? And so in this case, I would suggest having a conversation about, with a pain specialist about considering, a neuromodulation therapy and doing that trial. Because like I said, it's the opportunity to try it out before you commit to it. And sometimes, yes, something structurally needs to be fixed, but sometimes because of the rest of their health care, right? Whether it's their cardiac disease, their lung disease, or any other organ system, they may not be able to sustain that particular procedure. So we really have to look at the patient as a person and balance all of these competing interests.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody. Oh, one more.
Yeah, thanks so much. My question is more on the web-based platform or the app. My patient population is really rural. They are living rural for a reason. They're paranoid, right? They might have had PTSD and chronic pain for years and years. And the last thing that, they're concerned about telehealth. The last thing they really want is some AI-based app that's taking their data, right? And then using it for various things. We have a really hard time selling telehealth options. And so while I understand like the app-based interface is really, really helpful for that back and forth with the patients and their providers, which they desperately need that relationship with, sometimes it's hard to sell it to them. So I'm curious what strategies you guys have used for that.
Yeah, well, first of all, there's different versions, and they're all consent-based. And so if a patient decides they don't want to have access to it, that's fine. That's their decision. And it's very, very open for that. I think for these specifically, the virtual clinic option, it is something where the patient has to acknowledge with the physician for a session to begin. And so it doesn't do anything if the patient, if there's not like a pre-scheduled thing that the patient also acknowledges on their side. So no one can ever get access without the patient in the moment saying you can have access. And so for me, I think it's how we've designed it to protect the patient, because ultimately that's what we're there for, and at the same time give them full control. And so I would sell it as, look, patient always has control, and no access is allowed without that patient providing the access in the moment.
I think it does go back to autonomy, right? So probably a lot of your patients are saying, this is my lifestyle, this is my chosen lifestyle, and honestly, I would go about it and saying that this actually allows you to preserve your identity and your chosen lifestyle, because you're not going to have to come into, more of a city area to see you in the office. You're able to remain where you live in your own environment and maintain your care. So I would say that it actually allows them to preserve their identity with also acknowledging that, all the security measures that are in place to protect their data.
I think it's a really, really important conversation to keep having, though, because I mean, personally, it's scary to have a piece of technology in your body, especially that someone else has some control over. Just that itself is like kind of a thing to wrap your head around. And there are huge promises with AI and with this amount of data, but people that are concerned about data privacy are going to be even more concerned. So I do think it's a conversation we need to keep having, and maybe it would be great if we developed some maybe less invasive, I don't know, some options for people that maybe don't want everything but would still like to be able to access a clinician or something like that. It's an important conversation to have.
As a patient, honestly, I didn't really think about it as much. I thought that it gave me great relief. The aspects of telehealth and all of that, but if it's going to give me the relief, then I have to say put that aside for a moment and take care of yourself first.
Yeah, I was at a point where I would probably have traded a leg to be out of pain. So trading a little bit of my data security. I don't know, and I don't feel like I have traded data security. I don't want to say
not
that,
at all.
But I probably would if it if it saved me having to give that leg away to get rid of the pain.
Yeah. Well, the app that I have is pretty great. Before I came here, I was able to go on the Neurosphere. So I have an app. It goes on. It says Abbott, and I could just program whatever program or increase the stimulus that I need coming into the back to help my foot. And then later on, Dr. Patel said, don't forget to bring it down because, you know, sometimes if I overdo, the foot bothers me, so I'll bring it up, and then sometimes I'll forget to bring it down. So I think you have that. And I've done that in a restaurant. I've done that going to a movie. I've done that everywhere, and people don't even, they think I'm just playing around with my phone, you know? And it just says my name, Michelle. It doesn't say my last name, date of birth, or anything like that. So there's all privacy included with that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're way past time,
Yep.
so let's close it down. Thank you so much for coming, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Really
everyone.
appreciate it.